about to become a witness.
We give you all praise and honor. Worship you tonight, Jesus. We can do nothing without you, but all things are possible with you, Lord.
When you come into the Pentecostal church, you'll find a music that's fast and exuberating. You'll see people shouting. They'll run across the aisles. They'll jump up and down.
They express their faith in untraditional ways.
People who don't understand that would come in and say, man, these people's nuts.
But the Pentecostal movement is fast becoming a religious force to be reckoned with.
We are all guilty before Jesus Christ.
From their crusades that draw enormous crowds to their mystifying speaking in tongues.
My mouth was just taken over by the presence of God. And I began to speak in a language that I never learned in school.
It's when the emotional expression comes directly out without having to be formulated in words.
We'll go inside this movement as MSNBC investigates Pentecostals moving millions.
It's been a long time coming, but hold on, world. We have arrived.
To walk into a Pentecostal church is to walk into a place unlike most other places of worship. It's loud, energetic, much of it is unscripted, and the services are punctuated with worshipers speaking in tongues, making what might seem to outsiders to be strange sounds that believers say prove the power of the Holy Spirit. Pentecostalism is a religious movement filled with charisma that has drawn in more than 500 million followers worldwide.
Somebody help me. I know can't nobody.
As the Pentecostal church turned 100, there was reason for pride and celebration. After a century of rejection from mainstream churches, Pentecostals are now legitimate, prosperous, and powerful. Their visceral, high-energy religious movement spans from the heartlands to the inner cities. 1 of every 4 Christians is now a member of a Pentecostal church.
Against the works of darkness, we declare they shall collapse before the authority of the cross.
Pastor Jack Hayford, founding pastor of the Church on the Way in Van Nuys, California, has spread the message of the Pentecost to his congregation for over 30 years.
The day the church was born, the evangelistic significance of speaking in tongues was established because the Lord poured out the Holy Spirit for the purpose of touching the world with the love of God.
Speaking in tongues. It's a mysterious kind of prayer most churchgoers have never seen.
Speaking with tongues was a way of the Lord saying, there is a miracle with an immediate presence of you even now, and so you can expect miracle grace to travel with you.
Although the worshipers wouldn't allow us to hear up close exactly what they are saying, speaking in tongues is the secret human element that's put the Pentecostal movement at the forefront of the revival of religion across America.
They talk about having been touched by the Holy Spirit, having met God.
Harvard Divinity professor Harvey Cox explains the draw of the Pentecostal movement to those who seek a direct experience with God.
I think that we're in a period now in which, across the board, in various religious traditions, there are more and more people who are trying to get back to the experiential level.
Speaking with tongues, I believe, is a part of igniting a boldness to expect the Lord to put that miracle touch through you.
But more liberal church leaders like Father Ed Bacon, rector of the All Saints Episcopal Church in Pasadena, California, questions the Pentecostals' politics and their prayer.
Our congregation does not embrace speaking in tongues or other form of ecstatic worship. That is not a part of our tradition. It's not a part of our culture.
Pentecostals believe that God can enter their body and communicate through them, revealing himself directly when they speak in tongues.
The emotional expression comes directly out without having to be formulated in words.
Professor Cox equates speaking in tongues to what he calls primal speech.
What may be happening in part in speaking in tongues is people are reclaiming this kind of connection to what I call primal speech.
Pentecostals have a name for their mysterious words. They call it glossolalia, language of the divine. David Bernard is dean of the future Urshan Graduate School of Theology for Pentecostal ministers. He explains that speaking in glossolalia, or tongues, marks what Pentecostals call a baptism in the Holy Spirit.
Speaking in tongues is the initial sign of the Holy Spirit. It's the Holy Spirit that is essential to the born-again experience.
A term embraced by fundamentalist Christianity, being born again marks a renewal of a believer's relationship with God. It also often marks the embracing of conservative dress, conservative politics, and an abstinence from drinking and smoking.
God's healing people all over this place. An inguinal hernia has been healed. Several people being healed of hemorrhoids and varicose veins. The Lord is healing.
Christian Coalition founder Pat Robertson has capitalized on the conservative political views of many Pentecostals. Although he considers himself an evangelical Christian as opposed to a Pentecostal, Robertson describes how Pentecostals find their code for 21st century living in the pages of the Bible.
They are concerned about trends in our society that has to do with widespread abortion, that pornography, the absence of prayer and Bible reading in the schools, indoctrination of children into lifestyles that they think is contrary to what the Bible teaches.
Frequently, a Pentecostal experience, as I am aware of it in the Episcopal Church, is associated with a conservative theological and conservative political position, which I find to be incompatible with the gospel.
But Pentecostals claim all they do is interpret the Bible literally, believing that the world was created in 7 days and that Noah's Ark saved humanity from God's wrath.
We're all committed to the same Bible and to a pretty literalistic interpretation as opposed to an allegorical or symbolic interpretation.
By literally interpreting the Bible, Pentecostals believe that Jesus Christ will return to earth, an event biblically marking the end of the world.
There is a yearning and an urgency, and so what motivates our relationship with God and what motivates us to tell as many people as we can is we feel like the Lord is coming back real soon, and we've got to get ready for it.
Dean Bernard is far from being alone. The largest church in the world today is the Yoido Full Gospel Church, a Pentecostal church in Seoul, Korea, with over 500,000 members and 6 services a day.
If you can imagine one church the size of the population of Atlanta, Georgia, and all paying tithes, you can see the power of this church in Seoul, Korea.
Dr. Vincent Sinan, Dean of Regent University and author of The Holiness Pentecostal Tradition, explains how the Pentecostal movement has exploded worldwide.
Pentecostalism is now the religion of choice of the third world.
The Pentecostal church has taken root in the Americas with an estimated 4 million members in Brazil. Pentecostalism is growing faster in Latin America than anywhere else in the world.
In some places in Latin America, the percentage of Pentecostals is edging up from 25 to 30 to 35 to 40%. At present growth rates, there could be Pentecostal majorities in some countries within the next few decades. And that's on a continent in which for 5 centuries now, the Roman Catholic Church has been religiously and culturally dominant.
It's conceivable that the Pentecostals will become the majority of all the Christians in the world in the next century.
Although now a global movement, the Pentecostal church has its roots here in the United States.
Pentecostalism, as it now is growing and spreading, surely has to be understood as originally an American religious movement.
Two single file line from the starting point.
With a spirit of equality among believers, modern Pentecostalism proclaims that everyone can have a direct experience with the divine, regardless of class or education.
There's no way you can really explain what it is. That's why it's an experience. This is not a denomination, it's an experience. It's an experience that's real with God that anyone can have.
You okay? Yes, the presence of the Lord.
Next, with the energy of a rock concert, see why Pentecostal services are sending worshipers out of their seats and into the aisles.
When you come into a Pentecostal church, you'll find a music that's fast and exuberating. You'll see people shouting. They'll run across the aisles. They'll jump up and down.
I don't think you can understand Pentecostalism at all without understanding the music. It's not only an important element, it's an absolutely essential element in the whole movement. This is a musical movement in many ways. Sing a lot. When they pray and when they preach, there's a kind of a musical quality about it.
Hallelujah. Glory to your name, Lord. We praise your name in this house. Jesus, we love you. We worship and adore you. Hallelujah.
Pentecostals view church as a time for people to connect one-on-one to God and to each other.
The Pentecostal church, there was something about the worship that was so exciting. It was people, they were not controlled by their emotions. You could tell they was really happy. There was a smile on most of their faces. And there was just a joy. There's something different.
From a church of 200 to a stadium of 20,000, Pentecostals claim the charged atmosphere of their services is due to the presence of the Holy Spirit. In Birmingham, Alabama, at the annual General Conference of the United Pentecostal Church, the showman like the Reverend Jerry Jones preaches to over 10,000 exuberant attendees from all across America.
When the people gather together, we want that energy because we believe that that energy is a response to the presence of the Lord, that He does come to be with us through His Spirit, but that He is there. And that's when people's individual needs can be met in a service with 10,000 people. Of course, when you are anointed, you feel the Spirit of the Lord come upon you and you are preaching His Word, people respond in different ways to that, and my response is rather, I get excited, and it comes across as I speak, I think. At least people tell me it does, you know.
There has never been anything like the church, like she is today. Revival has come. The power of God resides upon His church. We are made for the moment.
Moving beyond established rituals and recitations, the passionate preachers in the Pentecostal churches employ a far looser structure in their services.
We use no liturgy, no ritualistic approach to God, so there is a freedom of worship there.
It's been a long time coming, but hold on, world. We have arrived.
A Pentecostal preacher has to be a kind of an artist and a diplomat, a careful director of a symphony orchestra in which there isn't any score.
I want you to come right now. I want you to make this commitment.
Despite its largely free-form structure, A Pentecostal service usually ends in a common, dramatic conclusion, a call for worshipers to gather at the front of the church and receive the Holy Spirit. Pentecostals view the call to the altar as an opportunity for believers to make a physical connection with their faith, a defining personal moment where one may speak in tongues for the first time.
Bringing people to this experience is the real goal. We believe that this is, it's often said, essential. The last and most unruly part of us is the tongue, and so he chose to symbolize, or rather express this experience, prove this experience by speaking in tongues.
With energetic music and emotional preaching, questions arise as to whether Pentecostal services simply shepherd the congregation into speaking in tongues.
Not being a Pentecostal myself, I can also say that I think that there are some leaders, preachers, who try to induce it, and maybe try a little too hard from my point of view to push it. But I think that's the exception rather than the rule.
Whether Pentecostal leaders coax their flock into talking in tongues or not, they clearly understand the powerful attraction of such passionate prayer.
And so as this exuberant worship, this joyous experience, the presence of God, speaking in other tongues, singing together, clapping our hands together, shouting together, I think these are the very things that capture people's attention.
Typically, people come with a need. They're on the verge of divorce. They have a desperate need in their family. Their son is on drugs, or they're facing a financial crisis. They will come to a church desperate. They will hear a message. They will believe it. Their life will be changed.
Next, the healers and the healed, as we look at those who proclaim the Holy Spirit does work miracles.
We believe in healing. We believe in complete deliverance. There's people here that used to be drug addicts and alcoholics, and they're not doing that anymore. They've been delivered. And they tried every kind of program before they got here, and it didn't work. But there's something about an experience with Jesus Christ, who we believe is God manifest in flesh.
Pastor Scotty Teets tells how Pentecostalism rescued him from a bitter life on the streets of Indianapolis.
There was a time I didn't like people. There was a time I was looking for trouble. I was on my way training for a prize fight in Indianapolis, where I came from. And I heard the singing and I heard the noise in that building. I said, man, what is this? And curiosity got me. I went inside to investigate, and it got a hold of me. I felt something I never felt before.
Like many Pentecostals, Scotty Teets received his faith at the altar and spoke in tongues for the first time.
All of a sudden, the Spirit of God came on me. It fell on me. I felt it all over me. And my mouth was just taken over by the presence of God. And I began to speak in a language that I never learned in school. And I knew it was a language. And from that time forth, my life absolutely, entirely changed.
Dedicating his life to the Pentecostal church as a pastor, Teets took his new message to a largely immigrant neighborhood.
I have French Guyanese in this church. I have English-speaking Guyanese. There's Polish here. There's Jews here. There's Italianos. I have a few Americans, with Jamaicans, people from Trinidad, people from Africa, Germany, Polish. There's 23 different nationalities are in this church, and we all get along real good.
Defying stereotypes of being a religion confined to the Deep South, the Pentecostal church has built a stronghold in the inner cities of America.
What happens in the case of immigrants or people moving to town is they're divorced from their roots, and maybe they were raised in some traditional religion, But now they're not connected to that religion. They're looking for friends. They're looking for family. They're looking for help.
They provide a kind of community in a world in which there are a lot of dislocated people.
In a movement that takes divine healing literally, Pentecostals say their faith can give poor immigrants actual medical help they could never afford.
Many of them in the countries they come from don't have insurance, and they're sick, and so they have to depend on something. When they find out that you can depend on God and He's a healer, they're drawn to this because we preach a lot of divine healing and deliverance.
And now, you that are sick and afflicted, get ready to be healed. Stretch out your hand to meet mine. And now, Lord, I bring the sick and afflicted to you, those with cancer, those with heart trouble, those in wheelchairs, those on crutches, those who are paralyzed, those that the doctors say there's no cure for. Heal! Heal! Heal!
I had cancer of the throat some years ago. They told me I'd never minister ever again. I went to the church one more time and prayed, and I said, God, you've been good to me. If you want my voice, you can have it. I come up out of there, and my voice came back. I knew immediately. I started speaking in tongues and dancing all over the front of that church. To this day, I've never lost my voice ever again. God does heal.
Pentecostals say everything in the New Testament, healing, signs, wonders, miracles, casting out of demons, speaking with tongues, all those things are still happening today.
It is in part the embracing of the supernatural that accounts for the phenomenal growth of the Pentecostal movement around the world.
Overseas, they react in the spirit and they react in the heart. When you go to a place like India, for example, or China, or Africa, or Latin America, people are responsive when they feel the power of God. They literally can feel, they can sense God's power, and when they do, they come out.
We are all guilty before Jesus Christ, the Son of God.
Indeed, Pentecostal crusades have met with spectacular success when it comes to drawing crowds like that of a rock festival. At one crusade in November of 2000, German evangelist Reinhard Bonnke preached to an estimated throng of 1.6 million Nigerians.
Third world countries have experience with evil spirits that they feel dominate people's lives and destroy their lives.
Now, a lot of nice middle-class Christian churches will go into these areas and say, these demons don't exist. You just have to get that out of your head that these demons exist. Pentecostals don't say that. They say, yeah, they exist, and they're bothering you, and they're besetting you, but here's the answer.
Lord, I hunger for you. Lord, I'm longing for you.
Next, a Pentecostal church at work in the inner city, and how their mission to help prostitutes and drug addicts attracted the attention of a president. The Pentecostal church is about much more than the power of prayer. It's about community and charity. And sometimes it's about politics and scandal.
Every day, Lord, is like a resurrection to me. Yes, it is. 'Cause I'm so close to death. While I
to see how people's lives can be changed. It's an incredibly important part of my vision for America.
In the presidential campaign of 2000, it was no accident that then-candidate George W. Bush stopped in at a Pentecostal church on the seedy side of downtown Los Angeles. He hailed the LA Dream Center as an example of a church actively helping their community and a symbol of a national movement. Matthew Barnett is a 27-year-old pastor working at the Dream Center.
America realizes that churches have got to get active again in their local communities. We just can't sit around and play church.
At the heart of the Dream Center is the War Room, where downtown Los Angeles is divided into a grid, and each zone seen as an opportunity to mobilize forces for the glory of God.
We serve about 30,000 people a week, food in the neighborhood, going every day into the streets.
The Dream Center runs a private school for area children where students learn Christian principles and recite pledges to both the American and the Christian flag.
I pledge allegiance to the Christian flag and to the Savior from whose kingdom descends.
I'm sure that there are Pentecostal organizations and communities that do have responsibility for the common good. Whether they're motivated by a marketing ploy or whether Pentecostalism is maturing, I think remains to be seen.
But with $500,000 a month coming in from private donors, the Dream Center can afford to set its own agendas, maintaining an array of social services. The Dream Center runs a teen center, an emergency shelter, and medical facilities operated by volunteer doctors.
We've opened up an AIDS hospice here to reach out to people who are dying of AIDS. We have homes for people who have drug addictions, who are coming off of heroin and just terrible things that they're dealing with.
We never have to worry about starving to death because we've got people like Billy and a couple other people that come around working for the Lord to bring food.
Billy has been at the Dream Center for 6 years. His drug addiction cost him his family, but he says the Pentecostal church salvaged his soul and then some.
It's a new adventure in my life. It's been it's an e-ticket in this